We'll do that again. Good afternoon. Welcome. This is the Marion City Council work session for Tuesday, November 7th. Thank you for joining us. First on our agenda this evening for this work session, we have a presentation on the Winter Lights program, the Leadership in Action class, and our Parks Director, Seth. It's all yours.
Oh, thank you. First time, so.
Don't let the chief be a rookie.
So again, presenting the Marion Leadership in Action class here to present the Winter Lights program for this year. Last year, as you recall, the project is going towards the lighting up the Artway, which will have litten up this coming winter, along with the rest of the park and City Square in the Peachtree. So without further ado, I'll let the class come up and present this year's project.
Welcome. Yeah, please speak into the microphone because the meeting is recorded, so thank you.
My name is Alyssa McDowell.
I'm Nicole Eels.
Really short. Tori Freeze. And as Seth mentioned, we're here representing the Marion Leadership in Action class of 2024. For anyone maybe that isn't familiar with Marion Leadership in Action, it is an opportunity for local professionals to learn about the city of Marion. So we meet during the school year, and each time we meet, we learn about different facets of the community, whether that's education or history, economic development, government. And another thing we do as a class is we have a class project, and that's what we're here to talk to you about today. Our project is going to be focused on expanding the current lighted Peachtree that sits in the Marion Square. A little bit of history on the Peachtree. The original Peachtree was given to the city of Marion in the thank you, Seth, in the 1990s during the first Gulf War. And it was meant to be a symbol of hope and peace and remembrance for lives lost. And then in 1993, the city launched Christmas in the Park, where the lighting of the tree was kind of a key element of that event. And then the tree remains lit for the duration of the holiday season. And this tree has been a huge focal point for the city of Marion during the holidays. So I'm going to turn things over to Tori so she can share a little bit about fundraising.
We are doing some pretty exciting things for the fundraising part. We've got our letter campaigns already mailed out. Hopefully you've gotten some of those. We also have our students also doing some follow-up calls, direct meetings with some good warm connections that we have there. We have proceeds from the Oktoberfest that equal about $5,000 that will go towards this as well. Some unique and fun fundraising ideas. We have 2 dates set for gift wrapping. That'll be at the Marion Public Library here in December. It will be just donation free will to help get the money for that as well. We'll also be at the Peppermint Walk. And we've also secured a radio spot with Z102.9 to help promote that, as well as our gift wrapping part to help get people there as well. We do have a warm connection with Elizabeth Vaughn Presley that we're really excited that we're going to try to get something solidified in the upcoming months for either the holiday or early spring to figure out a holiday or a concert or some sort to help raise money there as well. So more to come on that. Thank you.
So what we would like to do is extend the overhaul tree height from 30 feet to 38 feet. So we'd like to add 8 feet to the bottom of the tree. We would also like to add a 4-foot drum base. So it would take the total height of the tree from 38 to 46 feet tall. The cost of the total project is $46,313.44. We would like to ask City of Marion for $20,000 to contribute towards growing our tree. And this would be for next fiscal year, just to clarify, and the tree would grow as a result a year from now. We really believe that growing the Peachtree really aligns with the vision of Marion to reach higher. We feel that it's a complement to the upcoming and previous updates and investments that have been going on in the Uptown Plaza. And we appreciate your continued support in this project. We wanted to include just a little vision here of what we can look forward to with the ice skating rink. On behalf of Marion Leadership in Action, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I can feel your energy and excitement, so it's wonderful. Thank you for taking the opportunity to be part of the class and for taking on this project and helping to move it forward. So I applaud you for that. Any questions for them? Go ahead, Steve.
Just a comment. I mean, you are doing absolutely exactly what I was hoping we would do when we got that tree. And that is making it bigger, making it taller, so that people on the other side of Cedar Rapids can see it.
Exactly.
And the cool thing is when you come down Blair's Ferry Road, when you're approaching Marion, I mean, that is just gonna pop out and stand out. It's gonna be a great, great view. So love it.
H.
Yeah, just a couple questions. One, I was wondering how the class decided on pursuing this project, and my second question is, how tall is Cedar Rapids tree?
Seth, well, we were given this inspiration from Seth. So we are supporting this vision. And I don't know about the height of the tree of Cedar Rapids. so.
Well, it probably varies every year because it's a tree that's donated every year.
Oh, that's
from
right, yeah.
someone's yard or something.
10 feet probably.
That's a good question. Go ahead. Yes.
You mentioned a letter writing campaign. Is that citizens? Is it people know? Is it, how is that list or what is that list that you're working from?
Yes, I believe we sent out around 200 letters, if not more. And we targeted a lot of businesses in the area.
And then is there a recognition, like, how are the donors recognized for this project? If we are approaching people, is there a part to that or has that not been defined yet?
Well, I won't speak on behalf of the chamber, but I know in the years past, what we've done during the lighted tree is have some sort of signage recognizing those that have donated. I'm not sure if that will take part again for this year. It sounds like she's shaking her head yes, so.
And so if folks want to donate or are interested in donating, that's open to do that now? And how does that happen? Where do they?
So there is a link that we will have published from a website. The website will take you there. Initially, it's from the Marion Chamber, and then that takes you and then directs you to a site and link to get you there. And then as well as the Facebook social media for the Marion Leadership Action as well. We'll have shortcuts to get people there as well. And then cash donations at the events too.
So it's not open yet, the campaign. Can you donate? Can someone donate right now? Is the link live?
Yes, from my understanding it is. Is that correct? Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
The drum base, does that expand the width of the tree at all?
No, so the drum will sit perpendicular and then it tapers from the tree. So if there's any future expansion of the tree, which I wouldn't recommend, then we would need to get a new drum base for that. But we are planning, this is pretty much the height that our staff is comfortable extending it to, because we do have to put it together and we climb that. If you've seen us put it together, it's a process to get it up there, so.
And with the height being extended, does that change any of the plans for plaza?
No, we were actually, we put into the scope for expansion, so.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good question. Anyone else? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next item, we have an update on the solid waste collection study, and we'll take the opportunity to introduce our new interim public service director. Will you do that, Kim?
Yeah, absolutely. Ed, would you like standing alone? Thank you. I would like to introduce everyone to Ed Wilmus. He is the gentleman that we have been talking to through GovHR. We're using him very similar to what we have done for fire chief position, along with even community development when we no longer had a director there. So today we have Ed, who's going to help us through that process for the next 90 days, working through several projects, several highlights that we have going on in the public service department. So we're very thankful to have him join our team.
Welcome.
Thanks, Ed. All right. So the next item on the agenda is in regards to our solid waste collection study. I am going to reintroduce Jeff Phillips from SCS Engineering, and this is going to be you will recognize his face over the next several months as we work towards getting our garbage, solid waste automated system rolling out in September. At least that's our goal, is September of 2024. So we've got a lot of milestones that we need to hit. Therefore, you will see a lot of touch points with Jeff and our public service team in regards to how we are going to hit those milestones. And I have to say, public services, as we have been having conversations and bringing them along in this project over the last couple of months, is very excited to get this going. So we're excited to give you some updates and next steps.
Welcome.
Okay, good evening. Well, thank you, as Kim said, for the opportunity to provide you an update on the transition from manual collection to automated collection. What I wanted to do is give you an update on the activities that have occurred since the September 21st City Council regular meeting, where a decision was made to transition from manual collection to automated collection. Some of the work, we've identified 70+ activity lines of things that we need to do. And later on in the presentation, I'll kind of boil that down for you. But some of the primary things that I wanted to give you an update on were again, just to reference the strategy that was identified in September, the vehicle procurement status, cart size selection, cart procurement, education outreach, and then also talk about what's next. So just as a reference point, again, the city is going to be transitioning to automated collection. So currently it's a manual method. We're going to have automated trucks that help with the collection. And it's going to be similar sized types of trucks where they're split body, where that truck is collecting garbage and recycling at the same time for that customer. The difference now is there's a cart. And also the difference is that the operator's not having to get out of that vehicle. There'll be a weekly yard waste collection. And through that, obviously, there needs to be new trucks. So with the change from manual collection to automated collection, city staff with council approval has ordered those vehicles. And so we've emphasized priority for delivery of the garbage and recycling trucks. We want to make sure that those come off the line first so that we can get those so that we can start rolling out services. And at worst case scenario, we might be able to roll it out in phases. But we think we're pretty confident with the result that we got from the vendor, the contractor that's making the vehicles. They've indicated that the split hopper vehicles will be delivered sometime between July and August, well ahead of the September deadline. So that was pretty exciting news. Then it comes to probably the biggest impact that the residents are going to have are these carts. So Matt's really off to his modeling career here. So we're really excited that this is his first opportunity to model. So he's doing a great job there of showing the different sizes of carts in perspective to something. So what SCS engineers and staff are doing is researching what other communities have done. What cart sizes did they select for the different types of programs, garbage, recycling, and yard waste? How did they roll those out? What were those service fees? What ordinances, what policies, procedures were in place to make sure that the program was rolled out as successfully as possible? Additionally, with that, they cost money. So we want to put those costs specifically into the model to understand what's the most efficient, cost-effective service that we can provide to the city through this program. But throughout all of this, as you recall, there's been several different touch points for the residents, the customers, to say, how often do you participate in recycling? What are your likes, concerns, challenges perhaps with going to an automated collection system using carts? And so all of that is helping inform this next piece, which is working to identify what size of cart or carts are to be selected for the different types of services that are provided. Again, garbage, recycling, and yard waste. And each one of those will have their own cart. So it's not going to be one cart stuff is all going into. You have the opportunity to have all three carts. So based on that information that we've identified from all the different resources I just talked about and the efforts of really trying to dive into that, the suggestion is to go out for an RFP to work with vendors to produce those carts. Also, those vendors provide assembly, they provide delivery services, they have established warranties. They also can do customer database management. So SES engineers, and we'll be working with city staff to identify what types of services do you want to roll up into that proposal. Once that proposal is out and a vendor is selected, the vendors are indicating it's about a 3 to 6 week delay or a delivery time frame for getting those carts delivered. Again, that's fitting well within our with the project schedule to this point. Throughout all of this, there will be a lot of education and outreach opportunities. And I think of it as there are several different audiences. We've got city staff, we've got council, and we also have the public. So we want to make sure that everyone is being communicated to. And there's several different things to talk about. Already, we've worked with staff, and staff's been working really hard at branding the program, talking about, well, how are we going to roll this out? How are we going to communicate to customers? When it's time to swap out that cart, how are we going to communicate that? So we want to make sure that we're stepping through this carefully and thoughtfully, and the messaging isn't changing, that the branding isn't changing, that it's consistent across all services and all departments. And that there might be a cart selection, whether that's a size, or do I want to participate in yard waste or don't I? So there's going to be several different things to figure out, but we want to make sure that everybody is communicated to. And then through that, through the inception and through the implementation of this program, there's going to be ongoing communication about how to properly participate in the programs. So as I said earlier, there's at least 70 activity items that we need to do, and I'm sure we'll be identifying more as we go, but we feel like it's a pretty comprehensive list. I boiled it down into 4 chunks of time. So for each quarter, these are the primary activities that we want to accomplish. And you can see at the bottom, there's ongoing customer communication. So that's never going to be interrupted. It's just going to continue to flow through. So by the end of the year, vehicle procurement, we've done that, got that taken care of. We need to identify the cart sizes or sizes and the selection. So then we can identify service rates and the opportunity to go out for grants to help pay for some of these carts, at least for the recycling carts. There's opportunities that to get some additional resources. January through March, we're trying to identify who's going to provide those carts. We're working through city ordinances, programs and procedures into how this thing is going to be rolled out and really get into the weeds of those types of nuances. Then April through June, I'll be looking at the routes. How can we make them more efficient for the new types of services that we're offering? And then develop a very detailed program rollout schedule. Not just a September is our goal, but how is it going to happen? What neighborhood? What are those routes going to look like, and how are those specific services being rolled out? And then July, September, stuff's rolling in. So we've got the vehicles rolling in, we got the carts rolling in, and then it's time to actually start with the implementation plan. Again, the anticipated date for that is September. Last slide that I have for you is the next major point for this project, at least for working towards, is the December 5th City Council work session meeting. The intention is for, through the results of SES engineers and city staff and all of the activities that I previously talked about, is to present then recommended strategies for major program elements. And the major program elements are cart size or sizes offerings and what those service fees would be, and the desired cart vendor services that we'd roll up into that proposal. What do we want that vendor to do? And then a service rollout schedule, not a detailed plan, but again, an idea of how this thing is going to be rolled out. So then the intention would be at the December 7th regular council session would be an approval of those major component elements. Once those elements are approved, then a whole cascading of all the other activities similar to the one you made December 21st allows the next step of activities to occur. And that's all I had for an update. Any questions?
Thank you. Questions? Steve?
Two questions.
Okay.
One question is, as you go down the road, we're talking about cart selection. That's obviously where we're gonna get a lot of comments and questions. Do you envision that there's gonna be, the citizens will have options A, B, and C, which will be a mix of different cart sizes? Or do you know yet? Are they gonna be able to just go in and pick the ones that they want? Because you've got to have some way of predicting what to buy. So how are you gonna achieve that milestone?
Right now, the idea is to look at what other communities
Right.
that are similar to you have done. What's gone good, what's not gone so well, what their challenges have been, what you're currently using for garbage services, what you're currently having set out for extra bags outside of the 32 gallons, what's currently happening for recycling, and the survey results that we already have.
Okay.
So kind of combine all of that together to make some recommendations based off of that data. So I don't
Not sure
couldn't tell
yet.
you right now if it's gonna be 3 carts, 2, or 1.
Then I want to make sure I've answered a question correctly.
Okay.
Obviously, a number of people for yard waste are used to putting out maybe anywhere from 6 to 10 bags of yard waste, a lot of times grass and leaves. And they said, is that still going to be an option? And my initial response was, well, with the new yard waste yardie, my response was probably no. Am I correct in that response?
Yes. However, what we want to do is I think the recommendation is that we have a transitionary period because people still do have those bags, do
Right.
have those stickers. And I may not know if let's say, if I've got 1 cart, shoot, maybe I should have had 2 for yard waste. I just don't know because I've never had that cart before. Also, these carts are able to handle way more dense material so
Right.
they can pack and settle. So I might be okay with a 64 gallon cart, just don't know. So, but I want to emphasize that our recommendation, I believe, will be that there's a phase out process of that.
Okay, very good.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So the question I have, and it does relate to the cart sizing.
Mhm.
And this is maybe, a little further in the weeds than we need to be at this point, but is the lifting mechanism, the loading mechanism on the truck, that can accept any size cart that we might select?
Yes,
Okay, so we don't have to worry about having a mismatch of the loading mechanism with the carts that we want to deploy.
correct.
Okay.
Go ahead, Gage.
I forget if this was mentioned last time, but typically when people have automated collection, how many different size carts does a community offer residents in your experience?
It's all across the board.
Okay.
That's a horrible answer, but that's the honesty, even just in Iowa. Some communities have really had success where they've just offered one cart size or 2. Other communities have said, we need to offer 4. And it really stretches several different departments because that's a lot of ask and a lot of modifications that you're requiring to a system that may not be set up to allow that kind of flexibility.
Sure.
So it's just we're not quite there to answer the question of how many card offerings, but I would say the majority of that we've talked to like offering 2 sizes, but have a default. If we don't hear from you, you're going to get this.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Okay,
Okay.
great. Thank you.
We'll look forward to continued updates. All right, next on the agenda is a budget discussion. Capital Improvement Program. We have Brian.
Good afternoon.
This is- Okay.
So this is our second touch point for the CIP for fiscal year 25 through 29. So at the last meeting, we provided council with the staff's recommended list, the details of all the projects, and we kind of asked that you got some time to digest, and we would come back at the next council meeting for some direction and feedback. And then that will lead into finance, constructing a funding plan, budget work session in January, then CIP adoption in line with the budget in April. So I just wanted to, before we dive into fiscal year 25, I just wanted to give a quick update on fiscal year 24. So as you're aware, this is the year that we deconstructed the CIP. We built it back up. We're 4 months into that fiscal year. So our first good fiscal year here, if you call it that, of the reconstructed CIP. And then the good news is we have, for the projects that we've estimated expenditures in this fiscal year, 88% of those projects are actually in progress, whether it's design, construction, which is great news. The dollar amounts, we are projecting some higher dollar amounts, given we have some major projects in the second half of the year that are still to come towards completion, or some major expenditures, the public service facility, the fleet, plaza project, those to note. So we are expecting those expenditures to increase, and we are looking to in January to give council a nice status update per project for the fiscal year. So then into the next cycle for fiscal year 25 through 29, just a quick recap of the scoring criteria. So each department ranked their projects, their new requests. Then we had a meeting with leadership, and then staff compiled their recommended list. And so that's the list that is in front of you at your dais.
Right. I can jump in just based off of a conversation I had with a council member earlier today. Just to elaborate on the process that Brian just mentioned. So departments will submit their request, then they'll score it and rank their own department. We had a leadership team meeting, we typically meet on Wednesdays. And what we did was we asked those departments that have projects that kind of overlap. So Parks and Rec, Public Services, Engineering, a lot of the same type of projects, get together, make sure you're kind of thinking through how can we better collaborate on those projects, make sure that do they line up? Are there things that we can gain from economies of scale, whatnot? We had that group came back, and then from there we had an additional conversation about, well, let's kind of think back and reflect on the last year of council meetings. What have we heard brought up during council meetings? What kind of customer service requests have we received? What are some other things that we've just in the course of conversing with you or residents in our community? Let's kind of look at it from that lens. So I just wanted to provide a little bit more detail, and that's being responsive to a request from one of your peers on how that criteria, how we rank them and how we scored them in this new system. So thank you.
So on the slides, I'll show, and I'll go through the first or these next 4 slides, and then we can come back with any questions, feedback on the list. So a couple of points. So this is the first half of the staff's recommended list. A point to note: this is additional requests that would be layered in to the adopted CIP over the next 5 years. Okay, so these are not 1-year expenditures. These are all would be layered in, sprinkled in over the next 5 years. So the staff's recommended list, so the total comes out to about $10.7 million. Then, like Ryan was saying, we did try to put our council hat on, try to think of those kind of requests that you've heard about. And so we do have some additional considerations here, just under $1 million for council consideration. And then again, we can go back. I just wanted to kind of provide those next steps again, so we're all clear on the direction. So we are looking for some feedback, some direction on that list tonight. So then finance can go ahead and start to construct a funding plan in preparation for the budget work session in January. And we're projecting that will follow a similar kind of process, where we'll come back with some scenarios, impacts to the debt service levy, so you have a more holistic view when you're looking at the budget as a whole. And then again, just in line with adoption, hopefully, well, has to be in March, April with the budget. So I do want to go back and provide any opportunity for questions, and if Ryan has anything else to add here, we're happy to, and also, department heads are here to answer any questions about any specific projects.
This slide and the next slide are,
Yep.
they're represented in the handout that's in front of you on the desk to make it easier.
And you do have the list at the bottom, which is the list that staff is currently not recommending to fund at this current time.
This is a helpful way to present it. I like it. Are you ready for questions? Okay, go ahead, Grant.
So certainly the work you've done to try to get this into a prioritized list, I think it's a strong step the right direction. I mean, this is just really, it's project portfolio management. And there's a lot of things we'd like to do, but those don't necessarily represent the ones we must do. So I like this process at a high level. If, just for the sake of argument now, your top staff recommendations, the ones that the $10.7 million, how much additional funding is available to augment that, that initial selection? Is there a dollar set point that we can use to help discern what other projects might should move into the plan that aren't now considered?
Yeah, so our initial analysis looked at about an 11 to a $13 million range over 5 years. So we're being conservative here, given just stuff that we know about the budget and what might be coming down the line. But yeah, initial projections about 11 to a 13 between general obligation bonds, local option sales tax, which make up your two main funding sources of capital improvement.
Okay, and that was in the staff memo. So I just wanted to confirm that, so that's really the available funding to augment this project list with other things. Okay, all right, thanks.
Steve?
Yeah, I think one of the questions I posed to Ryan, and I think I pretty well already knew the answer, but I just want to make sure it's covered in this meeting. And that is, I think one of the pieces of information that I will need as city council, I think, in fact, as we determine what we should approve for the CIP, will also be based upon what is the 5-year projection for the debt service levy. I mean, we have a lot of stuff happening right now, big projects. So we're kind of front end loaded for some of these front years. But as we go down the road, I don't know exactly where all of these dollars are landing until all of this stuff gets on a new spreadsheet. We know what those projections are going to be, what the debt service levy is going to be. So as I looked at it from a personal standpoint, when I look down in the gold area, as far as the second screen, so if you go up to that one, the only one, no, one more, that one. Yeah, the only one on there, I guess I've never even heard about the first one, about a new roundabout at 31st and 29th. But the one that in the time that Tower Terrace has been opened up, that I've gotten more comments about is the second one, and that's the traffic signal at Irish Drive and Tower Terrace. So ever since that's been opened up, that traffic signal's been there, it's just flashing lights. I get more comments about that intersection. So if I were to personally lobby for one on that, that's one I would lobby for, that we know we're going to have to do it within 2 years. And I think doing it earlier is not going to hurt anything, will probably benefit. So that's, I don't know how everybody else feels. That's one I would lobby to add.
That's one that I was wondering about also, because with all the changes in the busing, there seems to be more concern and questions from people with children who live north of Tower Terrace, and have been asking about that signal. So that's just one to consider, I think. There was something else I wanted to ask about, but so yeah, the roundabout, I don't know that we've ever discussed that.
Did Mike want to add anything?
Yeah, so that one, we've received and filed a TAC request for a four-way stop at that intersection. Because we were in the middle of constructing 29th Avenue with all the patching, we were not able to do the traffic counts until after that project was completed. You will soon see that TAC report coming back to city council. And so that, along with the safe routes to school and finding locations for the kids to cross 29th Avenue. So with those two things so they're not necessarily directly related, but they're both a way to try and get across 29th Avenue, and then addressing the residents' concerns of having to sit at the intersection and not be able to go north-south or get out of that because of how much east-west traffic. So it's those pending problems that we see coming. That's why we put them on there. Similar to the Tower Terrace Irish Drive signal, with us paving that section next year, that's gonna increase that traffic, and then hopefully we can start meeting warrants.
Thank you, Mike. Do you have a question, follow up on that one or?
Well, again, Mike's comment about the warrants, I really don't care whether it meets the warrants or not. I mean, I understand your comment in the past about that. I just think it makes sense. I think there's a need and more of a demand that I would select that. The other comment I'd make on the Ninth Street parking lot, and I think that'll probably come up I'm assuming during the parking study that we have, is that's the one over here on the side that's a gravel. So I assume that's the recommendation on that may come out of that parking study, but if we ever consider that, we're gonna have to make sure we get the business community not using that all of the time, and it can be used for actual parking in the community, not by a certain business.
You must be able to read my mind today, because that was gonna be my next comment, is that I'm not so much in favor of improving that parking lot until we actually figure out how to keep the businesses from usurping that and using it as their own private lot.
Yeah.
So if we figure out that piece of it, then I'd be in favor of improving that. Otherwise, it's not for me, a priority. The one last question for me, then we'll go on the grant. The transit stop improvements, Dave, is that Dave? Did we get, we have CMPO money for that? Yeah, I thought we got a grant at least a couple years ago.
Yeah, and
That's
basically.
this grant, that's this project.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we were debating on whether we move forward with that or whether we hold off, depending if we're changing the transit.
Right, model, yeah. Okay, but we're going forward, or your staff is recommending we go forward with that now.
Well, that's the bus route that council's given us direction for, is to keep with the fixed route.
Right.
And so then adding the bus stops to the fixed route.
Yes. And this is the covered bus stops, shelters. Okay, that's it for me. Go ahead.
So, one, just for clarification, and I'll admit I didn't look at the project, detail sheet. The 31st Street sidewalk extension, which is at the end of the prioritized list here, is that on the west side of 31st by, Tobby?
Yes, if you recall, we had a resident request last year for that because we were building internal sidewalk networks, but there was no way to get to Tobby. And so, yes,
Right.
it's filling basically from McGowan north and connecting that gap that's in there.
Okay, great. That's important. Then this is on the low priority listing, and I don't think you had a slide for this, but we've got it in the packet and handout. There is two items sticking with the sidewalk motif, Indian Creek Road and Wallace Street improvements. And I understand there's quite a bit in there, but the feature that seemed important to me, because I've heard about it from my neighbors, is the lack of sidewalk leading to Indian Creek from the north. And so that project, I'll just say, I think that's an important one from the standpoint of it basically unisolates a neighborhood from Indian Creek School. And I know there's other work there with realignment of Vaughn Drive and stuff like that, but the sidewalk was really the feature that I thought was most important for student safety. And then the other one, because I'm compelled to always ask about this, and Chief, this is Fire Station number 3 relo. that's a big project and can't be done all in one fell swoop, obviously, given the limitations, but I always think that that'll be important even before you really start to understand, or maybe you can, final site selection for Fire Station 4. I don't, you know, can you model where 4 goes with an understanding that you're relocating 3?
We can. We've started that process internally with city GIS and with Rachel Murtaugh. She just does such great work, and we're looking forward to continue to study that to see the impacts of the community's evolution. We've updated our modeling now to include all of the new road infrastructure that's planned to be in the future to give us as accurate a picture as possible. But we look forward to bringing that information to you in the future.
Okay, thanks. And one more thing, Your Honor, just to loop back to the Indian Creek Road and Wallace Street improvements. I absolutely lost my thought. I guess we can move ahead. Sorry.
We'll go to Will. You can come back if you remember. We'll go to Will and then Sarah.
Maybe I'm missing it, but the Alburnett Road extension, is that not in here because it's further out than 29, or is that a different pot of money because we got the federal money?
It's already funded.
So it's completely funded?
Yeah.
Okay, never mind then.
Good.
There will be a request in the future for the section north of Boyson, but that'll be a different conversation.
Say that one more time.
The section that's north of Boyson, where the old Alburnett Road is, that's currently, yes, that will be a future request.
The old gravel path.
Yeah, that's right.
Sarah?
Thank you for all the work put into this. It's a lot when you look at this list, and appreciate I know a number of these we've been hearing about, as Grant mentioned with the sidewalk. I can look, the 10th Street side path, I know has been talked about for a long time, with reasons that it hasn't been completed. But I want to thank you on that 31. I agree with the traffic signal on Irish Drive and Tower Terrace. If we're talking about if that gets moved in there, because I see that every day. And the increase in the amount of people trying to go left, right at certain times of the day, it's very difficult off of Irish Drive. But also on that roundabout, from the parents that spoke here a few weeks ago, and just understanding, I feel like, and appreciate the work because of the Safe Routes to School as well, conversations. But yeah, 29th has become on that side almost a north and south of 29th cutoff, because there really just is no way to cross that road as it sits right now. And it's a wide road. So I appreciate that being on there. And also thank you on the Smithland Drive. Appreciate that in the neighborhood there that has been diligent in conversations about what can be done in that area. So thank you all for that. That's all I got.
Okay, Steve.
I think just one more comment. Again, I think we all appreciate all the work going into getting everything to this point as far as the CIP presentation is there. But I'm also going to assume that just like last year or previous years, we always have possibly the opportunity at our budget meeting to have kind of some of this same conversation. That as you get everything analyzed, then you're going to come to another point where maybe there's still some additional room for some items or some other projects that maybe we still need to look at or consider in January as part of the budget. So we're talking about some of these tonight, but I'm also assuming we're all going to have some opportunity in January.
Yeah, what is the next step?
Yep, so I'm hearing tonight, there's some, there's agreement for.
Brian, if you don't mind, I'll take this one. Steve, what you're saying is absolutely right. If you do remember from last year at the budget work session, we brought forth to city council kind of a list. We had kind of the list that we had agreed on, which I think so far what I've seen in green, we've kind of all agreed on. We've heard some comments about some of the other projects. We will bring forth kind of that a la carte option similar to how we did last year, where we had identified, hey, this is how much that would add to the debt service levy. We will also be bringing forth the aquatics center. One item we haven't really talked about in this discussion, but as its own, what that would look like layered in as well, and the implications to the debt service levy on that. So all of those discussions and that information will be provided for the budget work session, and we do expect to have a conversation on that at that time.
I'm sorry, I just have one more question. Thank you. The library bird friendly improvements. Who can talk about that? Like, are we having an issue?
So we're having birds that are running into the glass and, the remains are staying on the sidewalk.
Okay.
And that's not the best for the public.
I assumed we're having an issue. I was just curious. I hadn't heard about it, so. Okay. Any? Oh, I see. Anyone else? Gage, anything? Okay. Do you have anything else, Brian?
No, I think we covered the next steps.
Okay.
So I'll be staying up here for the next budget
Got the
discussion.
next one. Thank you.
So,
We're warmed up. You can-
yeah, we're just getting going. We're just getting going. So as we just talked about with the deconstructed CIP, we continually try to identify areas where we feel that can be improved. And so, one of the focuses, this year was on the asset replacement schedules. So the purpose of this presentation is to show you the analysis and the data that we've gathered, explain to you how we plan to bridge that gap, gain some feedback and some questions. So the asset replacement, just to note a couple of important points, is this is more equipment, furniture, rather than buildings and infrastructure that's in our CIP. And then the focus is on the general fund with the utility funds and road use to come later. So I won't read all the goals, but this is the goals that we kind of had when we set out on this project. And the main goal really is that we create a sustainable asset replacement fund. As we save for things in our own personal lives, this is important that we create that sustainability to replace our assets that the city acquires. So when we did this analysis, this is really a one-time snapshot of like, okay, all of our assets right now, if we were to replace them, given what we think their useful life is based on an inflation factor, what is the replacement cost of all of our assets across all of our departments? So those five there, police, fire, library, parks, and city hall, make up about 90% of the city's total equipment assets. You can see that police and fire there are large. Fire being larger, that's generally because their assets are longer life. So when you take that projected cost out with an inflation factor, with those one-time replacements, that's why fire, because some of their assets are 10 or 15 years in life. Police, like a squad car, you replace every 4 to 5 years. So that's why you see that kind of discrepancy there.
Also, just want to note on that slide, that also does not include your large fire apparatus vehicles.
Yep. Yes. So our fire engines are not in here. They are in our CIP. So I just wanted to provide an example of the asset replacement schedules that the departments worked really hard on. So I did appreciate all of their work that they did this year. It took a lot of work and a lot of questions and going back and forth with them. So I do really appreciate all of their support in this. So the columns that we kind of focused on were getting those projected replacement costs that we just talked about, the useful lives, when how long the asset is expected to last, and then that annual reserve amount, which we'll talk about in the next slide, which gives us that annual amount that we should be saving towards the future replacement of the asset. And the other thing that the schedule does is it gives us, based on those inflation factors and when the asset is projected to replace, it gives us a nice per fiscal year replacement costs across all departments or per department. So then that annual reserve is like if you were saving for a car yourself and it's going to take you 5 years, it's the same idea. Based on the useful life and the projected cost divided by that useful life, we get that annual set aside reserve amount, whatever you want to call it. And across all of the departments, we're looking at just under $2.4 million. You can see there that the police and fire get closer together when we talk about just the annual reserve amount. So we wanted to kind of model out the cash flow and what that would look like. So if you take that annual reserve amount of 2.4 million, if we did transfer that amount from general fund into asset replacement, you can see that our ending fund balance there, the dark blue line at the bottom, does stay fairly consistent and is steady. The thing is, we have not been able to, or we have not been funding our asset replacement fund at that amount. So in the next slide, I just wanted to show in the last kind of couple of years, we've been transferring 800,000, 900,000, and in the budget for fiscal year 24, it's about $1 million. And you can see if we did continue at that rate, then the fund does go negative by fiscal year 27. I did want to show the 1.5 million annual transfer because that is, as we're working with Michael Maloney and DA Davidson, that's the numbers that we have been plugging into our model for the general fund. So fiscal year 28 would be the negative amount there. So I just wanted to kind of, yes, they're kind of big numbers, but we feel that, you know, doing a piece at a time, we know that this is not something that we're going to fix overnight. We do have a plan, so we want to kind of lay out our short-term vision. We want to have another look at these schedules, and so in line with the budget that's due on December 1st, we're going to ask department heads just to have another look, really dive into their fiscal year 25 estimated replacements. Are we being realistic there? You know, is it based on needs or wants? We're going to look at the thresholds for the asset replacement program. Right now, that threshold is $500. We set that. It's a low threshold. I see Steve like kind of smiling there. We did that intentionally to actually gather all that data that we want to make this analysis. And we know that threshold, we may want to increase that threshold, but we wanted to gather all that data so we had the full, we had everything so we could base our analysis on. Then looking at the historical analysis, are we really being realistic with what we've done in the past and how we've replaced our equipment, best practices? So we want to dive into that and establishing a policy for what's our minimum or reserve minimum fund balance. A couple of long-term goals is we want to maybe, we'd like to associate some kind of condition scoring metric. So then the departments can actually, along on their asset replacement schedule, score their assets and with the condition, because we may, even though the estimated useful life is 5 years, the asset may be in relatively good condition. So given that scoring metric, maybe then we push that asset out by another couple of years. And then create an actual policy and a procedure for the asset replacement program going forward. So I know that was a lot of information. If there's any questions.
So for us,
Any
the
feedback?
decision-making comes at budget time?
Yes, so this is again, information. We just wanted to give you an update on what we're working on, how we wanted to move forward in our next steps with the departments and all of the work that we're doing here to try to make that fund sustainable. So
This is very good work. Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, I'll just make it,
Yeah, go ahead.
just love to make a comment because again, the lion's share of the work has now been done. And this is another great example of what the staff has been doing over the last 1 or 2 years to improve all of the processes to make better decisions for the city. So again, kudos to everybody involved. I know it's a lot of work to get to that point. Again, when I was at Vector, we spent a lot of time with the depreciation schedule, understanding what's in there, what's not. And sometimes you find out there's something in there that you don't have anymore. I'm sure you find that out too. But anyway, great work.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. And everyone else who's worked on this.
yeah, thank you.
Our next item, we have Gary. Vacant building fee structure.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council.
Gary?
So for Thursday, we have a resolution to set a public hearing for, in the next council meeting. So real briefly, I'm gonna go over the ordinance. Basically, it states that a vacant building, if you have one vacant building in Marion, you have to register it with the city per the policy. The policy will bring forward later, it'll be actually in December. We've been through it a lot of times, so we'll get into that at a later date. It also states in the ordinance that, there are fees that are gonna be required if you have a vacant building to pay, and when you register it, and there also could be fines if you don't, register it. There are, exceptions to, having them to register, buildings for sale. That's one of them that we thought that, if somebody has a house for sale, we don't want them to have to register it as a vacant building. They're trying to sell it, they, doing what they can do. Buildings that are damaged, by storms or fire, what we'd like to do is give them, 90 days. We can alter that a little if they're working on permits and getting things going. Takes time to get insurance. We've seen that with the derecho. We still have people that are replacing stuff from derecho. So that's over 3 years ago. But we're gonna work with people with that. And then, residents that want to leave the community over the winter extended period of time. I was talking to a gentleman the other day that leaves periodically, goes overseas for work, and he has a house. So it's like one of those things that we want them to register it so that we know that it's not occupied. And we also would get a contact person, so that if there was, if it was wintertime, there was snow, they wouldn't get scooped, we could, have somebody to get a hold of. So there are some exceptions to that. So when we're trying to figure out our fees, I put together some numbers that I feel we're fairly comfortable with, staff time, how long it was gonna take them, how many times trips we we're gonna have to do, and how many times we'd go buy things, the buildings. And we came up with some numbers. I'm estimating the staff time, between $750 and $1,350, probably what it would, depending on whether it goes really smooth or it doesn't go smooth. So, we came up with these numbers. We thought register a vacant commercial building at $1,000. That'd be for a year. A house, residential would be $500 for a year. And then after the first year, if they wanted to leave it vacant for more than a year, then they would have to re-register it at a higher price. So our next steps, like I said, we want to set a public hearing. Want to do that on the 9th, and then we're gonna do the actual public hearing on the 21st of November. And then, hopefully the ordinance will be adopted on the 21st, and the policy would be approved that same time. And then we were looking at, implementation in January 1, with giving, 90 days or 3 months, so it'd be April 1st before we'd actually start really trying to enforce the vacant building. We would do a lot of outreach. We're talking about sending postcards out to the people that already have vacant buildings, so the ones that we know of, so we can get their input at the public hearing. So, any questions?
Questions? Go ahead.
Gary, have you had an opportunity maybe to see what some of our comparable cities are doing in this regard? Or maybe there's fees? Well, yeah, just how they're treating, vacant buildings.
There are a number of them, jurisdictions that are, doing the vacant building. Cedar Rapids has one, Hiawatha has one, Clinton. We really kind of looked at, Brooklyn Park, Minnesota for some of ours. Fees are all over the board. Clinton charges $1,000 for the first year, $2,000 for the second year, and $3,000 for every year after that. And they also have a nasty policy about tearing buildings down. So, in Cedar Rapids, I don't remember exactly what theirs was, but it was less. Hiawatha is $350 for a year. I mean, I can come back with numbers if you need, but we're probably a little higher than some, but we're not as high as a lot of them either. So
Sure. Okay, so you've done that research and that's really what I just wanted to confirm as a guiding post to what we're doing.
Yep.
Yes, and if I may, we did engage, Gary did a great job engaging with the steering committee that consisted of not only council member, realtors, individuals that own business properties as
Right.
well, along with the chamber. So we had a great group that really studied and worked through the every step of this process.
Thanks for mentioning that, because I think that gives everybody confidence that, you know, more input and more people having an opportunity to be at the table, I think, ends in a better result. So,
Right.
yeah. Thank you. Ahead.
Myself and Randy were on the committee, so.
Well, now I'm
Realtor,
worried.
insurance, so yeah, Realtor and insurance, so we had that on the committee right there.
Now I have questions.
No, I think that you were the right people to have on there. Yeah, so, okay.
All right.
Anything else to add, Gary?
I have nothing else to add, not right now.
Thanks for all your work. I have to go represent the city at another meeting, so I will turn over the meeting to the Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. Have a good time. Okay, so this brings us to our upcoming agenda review. And the first item that is marked is A7 under the consent agenda. However, is there anything anybody has prior to that? Okay, Leanne, A7, it's yours.
Thank
Or
you.
A6. Which one is it? A7, it's here on. Okay.
At the last meeting, the City Council approved the annual tax increment financing or TIF indebtedness certification. Typically, the Finance Department does bring forth the annual urban renewal report and that TIF indebtedness certification at the same time. However, due to the property tax reform bill, we prioritized the TIF indebtedness so that we could get that to the county sooner, so that the county can hopefully give us our taxable valuation sooner. Shared that we would present on both tonight, so I do have both presentations covered, or both reports covered in this presentation. So I always like to start with the basics on a refresher of what exactly is TIF. Tax increment finance is essentially the use of additional tax created by a growth and valuation of a property as a financing mechanism. More specifically, additional taxes created when constructing, say, a building on land, and we're using the growth to pay for things. Just a specific Marion example, Legacy Manufacturing prior to an expansion project was valued at 9.4 million. After the expansion project, the property was valued at 20.7 million. This created a taxable increment of 10.2 million, and the taxes paid on that value were then reimbursed portion of them back to the developer, which helped them to pay for the project. So in essence, that is what TIF is. I love providing the example because as you can see from fiscal year 20 to 21 over on the top right, the debt service, the city does receive that debt service increase right away. That is excluded from the TIF rate that is used. And then you can see on the bottom left how Legacy received that rebate for 3 years, and then that amount gets released to all the taxing jurisdictions. So how do we utilize TIF? The agreement with Legacy was called a rebate agreement, and rebate agreements are just one of 3 different types of obligations for which TIF can be used. The other 2 are internal loans, where the city fronts a payment of sorts using another fund and then repays that fund with TIF. And lastly, bonds and notes, which are commonly used for infrastructure improvements. For example, Tower Terrace Road, or even an economic development grant. For example, an economic development grant was provided to Town Place Suites. Use of TIF is regulated with the following reporting requirements that you can see on the screen. We will briefly highlight the first 3, and one quick comment on the last one. The city is required to disclose large TIF obligations on
what's called Emma, but essentially to all of our investors or the people that buy our bonds. So starting with Gatsby 77. Gatsby stands for Government Accounting Standards Board, which rules how governments must account for things. So this diverted TIF revenue actual expenditure amount represents amounts paid solely to developers. And this is required by Gatsby Statement 77. The State Department of Management does provide the tool that does break this out by taxing entity. It's not all that surprising. A large portion of it does come from the school districts, the county, and the city. So when I say diverted, these are amounts we're using in TIF. Once the agreement or the rebate is complete, those amounts do get released. So moving on to the annual urban renewal report. This graph represents the total expenditures for fiscal year 22-23 out of tax increment finance. As you can see, Collins Road is our largest urban renewal area, accounting for over 75% at 3.4 million. Central Corridor follows at 725,000. And then speaking briefly about the others, Winslow Road urban renewal area is expected to be finished and complete after fiscal year 23-24. We are primarily just spending down the balance of the low to moderate income set aside dollars, which is required in a residential urban renewal area. Echo Hill Road, we actually will see an increase with the roundabout. The Echo Hill Road roundabout is being offset, the debt service is being offset by TIF. And then 29th Avenue actually only has one obligation in it right now, and that is the internal loan for administrative time, administrative professional staff. So just a little bit of detail on where those larger payments or rebates that make up the numbers. Navy blue is the Collins Road urban renewal area, light blue is Central Corridor, and these are all of the rebates greater than 50,000. This is what the actual expenditures look like graphically. The bonds notes, as you can see, are in dark blue, the gold color rebate agreements, internal loans are kind of the teal color, and then low to moderate is in the green. Just a few comments on this. You can see that our bonds notes has been fairly stagnant over the years. The rebate agreements has increased as we've seen the rebate or the development agreement with Genesis Equities for 6th Avenue come online. GLD Properties, which is the development that surrounds the hotel, have come online. Easttown Crossing has been a big one. Victory Sports, the TWG or the lofts on 5th Avenue, the apartment complex there. And then out on Terratorus Road, the strip mall that includes the chiropractor, Ascent Therapy, I don't know, Barrel House. Doing that off the top of my head. And then moving on to the TIF indebtedness certification. So just a reminder from the last meeting, this is the request that we submit to the county on the TIF that we plan to use for the next fiscal year. So fiscal year 25. Again, you can see that overall trend where Collins Road does make up the lion's share, followed by Central Corridor. 29th Avenue and Echo Hill Road, although they show 0%, it's like point something percent. So it just shows how minimal they actually are. And West Tower Terrace Road, as I mentioned, primarily just that strip mall and some bonds for West Tower Terrace or for Tower Terrace Road. Again, sharing a little bit of the detail that makes up those numbers. Collins in navy blue, Central Corridor in the light blue. And these again are rebates greater than 50,000. Shared graphically. I already talked quite a bit about the rebate agreements. Internal loans have decreased from fiscal year 24 to 25. Some of those internal loans were a upfront grant to Mojo Properties for the elevator that went into that building. We had an airport catch up on some of the expenditures we had for the airport. We also have Broad and Main that is coming online for that. And then the bonds notes, the slight increases just for the Echo Hill roundabout previously mentioned. Team Finance has been working with DA Davidson to complete models for each of the urban renewal areas. All info has been provided to DA Davidson, and we do expect to have the models completely built in November. I did provide to City Council a detailed schedule for one of the urban renewal areas, or the model for one of the urban renewal areas. I have not been continuing to put efforts into the forecast that I was previously making because we are working with DA Davidson to create that one. However, I did want to share a few of the debts that we do expect to be expiring. For instance, 2023, we did make final payment on Legacy Manufacturing, Memorial Hall, and that internal loan I mentioned. And then these are some of the debts that are starting. So big one coming off, a bunch coming on. I believe I mentioned it in the memo on the TIF certification, but we are fairly static, very, very steady as far as our request. There was not a large jump in our request, and that is always kind of the plan, is to keep that steady. Any questions from council? I know TIF is complicated.
Okay. I don't think there's any questions.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, is there anything prior to C1 that anybody has a question on? Okay, so let's go to Chief Fagan on C1. Chief?
Yes, good evening, council. Very pleased to bring before you for your consideration this week, adopting the City of Marion Emergency Operations Plan and Continuity of Operations Plan. Just a reflection, about this time last year, we brought forward an action plan with several action items for the city. This was one of the key ones that we've been working on as a city to bring before you. We're pleased to be at this point to where we have these plans drafted in place, ready to go. And then the next step will be to implement an emergency management program for the ongoing review of the plan, training for staff, and also scenarios and tabletop exercises, as well as full-blown exercises. Happy to answer any questions you have about the plan or anything regards to the program.
Any questions? Well, my observation is this is a big leap up the maturity curve for our organization. And I just appreciate everybody's work that has gone into this. And I am sure that the lessons learned in aggregate that came out of the derecho were a catalyst to a lot of this. And so now the challenge obviously will be to maintain this planning base going forward as our needs continue to evolve and change. So Chief, from my vantage point and my experience in this kind of a world, I congratulate everybody for getting after this. It's an important milestone. Okay, it looks like you have C2 as well, the next item.
Yes, sir. We're also bringing forward a resolution for the consideration to approve technology optimization within the fire department. We are discontinuing one operation software and requesting to replace it with another, which we believe will create tremendous value in performance monitoring with a net savings cost of just over $1,300 to the FY24 budget. We'll be able to monitor department response performance, leveraging GIS data in a more real-time fashion to be able to provide you more information on performance regularly. So we see it as an opportunity of right-sizing our software and improving our communication through management channels.
Good. Questions? No? Okay, very good. All right, Seth, you're up for D2. Any questions on D1?
Hey, Seth, Your Honor, if you don't mind. There was a council question on D1, which is the resolution approving purchase of a Bobcat in the amount of $85,914.89. I thought it would be helpful to the council to explain a little bit on why that $85,000 number is being used rather than the amount after the trade-in. It simply has to do with the accounting, and we will be working with Kara to talk about how we can make that a little better or more clear as far as the language on the resolution title, but there is a trade-in with that one that is not the amount that we will actually pay the vendor.
And there is a correction for that amount. So we failed to put in the for the shipping. So on Thursday, you'll see an amount that reads $88,894.89. So
Okay. Will those corrections be, shown in then the staff memo for Thursday's?
They have
agenda?
already been made, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Great, thank you. Any questions about that? Okay. All right, so, D2, Seth, all yours.
So this is being brought back to city council. So last meeting, we had a resolution for approval for window repairs. That original proposal didn't meet the full scope of what we were expecting, which would be some wood repairs to some of the framing around the windows. This proposal is for that full scope of work. And Wadsworth is expected to be here in about a couple weeks, and if weather allows it, then the work will be completed then too.
Okay. Questions? Yeah, Gage?
Just checking because I haven't had a chance to talk to folks about this in a minute, but has all of this update, I'm guessing, has already been communicated to the resident that owns property?
Yeah, I reached out to Jesse over there and communicated as far as the work being done, and they seem very pleased.
Cool, thank you.
Okay. Anything else on that item? Yes, Ryan?
Just really quick, this will be paid for out of proceeds of the sale. And then also just wanna, it's been a while since we've talked about this with the council, but, when we received direction to proceed with the sale of the McGowan House, council was very, much interested in having the HPC work on and establishing some sort of grant program for historic preservation. So we just want to make sure that that is still the direction we plan on, now that the transaction has occurred, plan on getting the HPC going on that.
Good. Okay. Very good. So moving forward, anything prior to F3 on the next page? Otherwise, we're back to Gary. Okay. All yours, Gary.
All right. So on Thursday, we have a resolution approving the purchase and agreement with BSNA Cloud Software. That's community development software that we're hoping will, or confident will be a replacement for our current software and be able to do the things that it does not, that a current one does not do. The current one does not work with rentals. It's cumbersome at best for the permitting and code enforcement, and not all the departments use it. Right now, we're using 3 programs to track our rentals, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense doing that. If you remember back on April 18th meeting, we asked for the allocation of $200,000 of the ARPA funds. So that's what we'll be using to pay for this. We've received 7 proposals. There was 3 that stuck out: the BSNA Cloud, the ICC CDS, which is a community development software, and the Citizen Serve. They all came in under our budget, and they all had a reasonable 10-year cost. Some of the others came in under budget, but the 10-year cost was well over $1 million. We thought that was a little pricey. So.
Question. Yeah. On that slide, what makes BSNA Cloud 10-year cost so much less than all the others?
Well, that's a good question. And we've investigated the company, the software, and I don't see, other than they're a small company, they have lower overhead. They've been in business for 30 years. I think it was like almost $30 million revenue every year. I honestly think they just do it less money than some of the bigger companies. Terrell, do you have any comment to that?
Yeah, we looked at that very hard because that did come in quite a bit lower. All the vendor demonstrations we did, we couldn't find a reason why they should be any less. They were just as good as every other software we looked at, but I, excuse me, actually sent the pricing sheet into to our vendor multiple times. I said, "Are you sure?
Yeah.
Can you please fill this out for me, make sure I'm doing it, check my formulas, check the math." And that's where it landed, so.
Is that a locked in number or is it just an estimate at this
We
point?
will have a locked in number. Well, I'm assuming it will be locked in number once we
Yeah,
have the
yeah,
resolution
so
approved.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
renewal cost is subject to.
It's part of their quote though?
Yeah,
Okay.
so the only variable may be the data migration. They gave us an estimate of how many hours, right? Is
Yeah.
what, that it would take us how many days. That might be the only variable but everything else was pretty cut and dried.
I just factored in 3% inflation cost year over year to get the 10-year after that first year.
Good deal.
We did have demonstrations from their top three vendors. They all had their really strong points. And after reviewing them all, our committee was selected to be SNA. That was the one that seemed to work best for everybody. It is used by other jurisdictions. We talked to some people up in Michigan that were using the rental stuff and they were very pleased with it. Permitting and everything, planning will have a planning part of it. So you'll do site plan review and all that. That'll be in there as well. It's cloud hosted. So it had secure data centers. So pretty much anywhere we have internet, we can have our software. It is developed as a web browser, so that is a good thing. The internal features, it actually will work with our existing GIS. So all the layers that we have already built, we'll be able to move into this. It meets the needs of all the users that are going to be using it. It tracks all of our property maintenance issues. So our code enforcement will track better. We'll be able to keep track of that. It has a comprehensive business licensing module. So that one we use, Rachel uses it for the licensing for liquor license liquor license and that. So that's a very good module in there. And it also has an automated renewal process. So like our rentals, once we complete it, it'll automatically set that for 2 years out or whatever date, whatever time we put on that. So it'd be nice. It'll be real helpful because our current software doesn't even come close to that. Should save us a lot of staff time. External features, online applications. So any consumer, contractor will be able to apply for their permits and online. They will be able to schedule, they can't schedule, but they can request this inspection schedule. We can't let them do it because if there's we don't only have so much manpower, so we can't let them actually schedule, but they can request to schedule an inspection. They'll be able to go on and view their activity. So we go out and we approve a rental house or permit inspection, and the guys do that out in the field. They'll be able to instantly look at that online and be able to tell if it passed or not. And then online, well, there's also a permit search, so they can go back and they can search permits from, prior cases or prior permits that they've had. And also they'll be able to pay online. So that'll be another thing. And hopefully this is the way they've explained it and the way we are anticipating is that the consumer, the residents will be able to use it as well as contractors. Right now, we have that on our current system that the contractors can use it, but the residents can't. So we're hoping this will really help speed things up on our end. So our timeline. So November, December, once we get the contract signed, we'll have to make our first payment. And then February of 2024, assuming that's 90 days after the execution of the contract, we'll be starting to work with BSNA to start figuring out how to get all of our stuff in there, all of our data in there. They'll come through and they will talk to us about how we need to set up our system. So they'll start doing that. Then January, March of 2025, somewhere in that vicinity, is our activation of our site. We should go live hopefully right after the first of the year, 2025. And then when the project is completed, they'll be on site to help us get through it. They're gonna be there to work with us and train us. And then when we say that we're good and they've, together we're all saying that we're done, then we'll make our final payment at that time. The staff is recommending the purchase of this software. Something I was gonna mention and I didn't, BSNA is used by Lynn County right now. They're the only other jurisdiction in Iowa that is using it. So we did go down there and we looked at it and we really liked it. They've had it for 20 years. The cloud version, they've only had for a little over a year because they just went to the cloud version, but they had it on site. When I worked at Lynn County, I actually used the software and I really liked it then, and I'm excited about it now. I think it's gonna really make our life easier, so. Any questions?
Gage.
Just a comment. I think just looking through the council agenda, I just see this as another kind of win for Marion here, and just thank you for taking the time and doing the extensive research, because it sounds like between the efficiencies that this will provide compared to other programs you guys are using now and the smart leveraging of the ARPA funding, I just think it's a really smart pursuit. And so, yeah, thanks for the research to you and the team for going out and doing that.
Definitely a win. It should make our rental just so much slicker that, right now it's really tough, so it takes a lot of staff time. We're hoping to reduce the staff time by a lot.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Gary, on that point, a question I have is, why does it take a year to deploy this? It's cloud-based. Its structural templates ought to be pretty similar to other users.
We thought that as well. In fact, I misread their interpretation of how long it was gonna take. And I was shocked when I found out it's gonna actually take over a year. There's a lot of data. They do our data migration, and to get it set up. And also they have taken on a lot of customers here recently. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, one of the other softwares was 15 months. This one they said was 18 months, and then they come back and they said, well, we can probably get it, quicker than that. So that's when they gave us a new timeline. Yeah, it's takes a while.
Well, yeah, it does. Okay, but maybe they'll beat it and everybody's happy, right? So there's a couple of questions that I have. So we're buying this software capability, correct?
Right. We will purchase the software. We will have a yearly fee to pay to keep the software up. So.
Okay, there's a maintenance fee. What's that maintenance fee?
Go back to that 10-year slide.
Okay, okay. So their maintenance fee is low, hence
Yeah.
their 10-year cost.
So
is
the 10-year cost is what it is the annual fee.
low. Okay.
It's around 32 or
Yeah.
33 a year. 33
All
a
right.
year, so, yeah.
And so how long has Cedar Rapids been using this? Or
Cedar
Lynn
Rapids-
County, I'm sorry.
Lynn County's been using it for 20 years. Well,
Okay.
they've been using the cloud base for about a year and a half now.
Okay.
And it took even though they had the on-site servers and they just converted everything over, it still took them pretty close to 6 months to get that all accomplished, so.
All right. Anything else? Gary, thanks. This
Yeah.
is a strong step down the maturity curve too, so, or up the maturity
Yeah,
curve.
this one has been a long time coming, so.
Yeah.
We're happy to be there.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next item that's marked is community development F1. Anything in advance of that anybody has a question on? It's kind of like, no, wouldn't dare. Okay, F1, Dave.
Yes, we've just highlighted this one today, just in case there's any additional questions or follow-up. We have a few items we're going to address that Thursday regarding the live workspace. But today it was just, if they have any other questions or feedback before we move on.
Sir.
So, we've had some comments. This is what I think what you're talking about, but can you elaborate a little bit? The live workspace has been in conversation, and then the individual who has requested they be removed because they're barely.
Right.
So that's all gonna be addressed on Thursday. That's for, are we discussing that today or?
If you have questions if you have questions or statements you want to make regarding live work, that'll give me some more direction to respond by Thursday, but essentially, we're still looking at live work and making sure that we have a clear understanding of what it is and is not for you guys before you make that final decision on the live work.
Live work, but then addressing the individual who's just barely into that space, is that something that what is the process for that situation? If that person is removed or not removed, or how does that proceed?
Sure, I'm gonna defer to Kara. Yep, she is here. Just regarding the process on what that looks like.
So the first comment I would make is if you remember, we did the amendment, so there's no legal non-conforming. So as far as any concerns that he had brought up about expanding his use, things like that, that would not be affected by the moratorium. It would only relate to new projects. So I did want to make sure that we did address that. If council did want to consider a request from someone to remove their property from the moratorium, that would be by amending the ordinance. So we could bring that back with an amendment to the ordinance.
So for the individual who's a few feet captured into this, what we would do is we go forward with the ordinance and then we do an amendment afterward. We don't do it in the middle of these readings.
Yes, because we wouldn't necessarily want to start over, and we'd want to make sure that we took the time with that consideration and made sure that while we're doing that, we're not missing another property that would be similarly affected potentially, or that we weren't missing something that we would need to leave that in. So that's absolutely something that we as staff can sit down and talk about and then bring back recommendations.
Okay, I
And
want
this
to make
is-
sure we're like talking, that we're addressing those comments or the things that have happened without, and then understanding, having not been through this process before.
Yeah, and there's about 6 or 7 properties off the top of my head that are just on the wrong side of the line.
Okay,
So it's beyond just him.
okay, that's what brought to attention. That's my question.
Anything else on that? Just, yeah, Will, go ahead.
Question about that. So when you say the 6 or 7, it's all right there to the west of Walmart?
Yeah, correct. I don't have the pointer. It's the it's a little purple, just west of Walmart. It's on the screen. It's that little
Yeah.
purple area.
North of 8th, is that 8th?
Yeah, the south of 8th
South of
Avenue,
8th, sorry. And then
west of Walmart.
Yeah. So I said, whenever we've started this conversation, that whole section I think should be taken out. And I still think that should all be taken out. I don't think there's any issue with what goes on back in there, because it is an industrial area, in my opinion. So I would like to see that removed, that area completely removed from this.
What then does that do to where we're sitting in our timeline now? Does that restart us?
Well, if it's an amendment after the fact, I mean, that's totally fine, just as long as we get it all taken out.
Okay.
Yes, what we would envision at this point in time is that we would still proceed with the final reading on Thursday, with staff understanding this conversation to be direction that we should consider what Will has just proposed and bring that back in an amendment form for council consideration.
Okay.
And now that I have the pointer, it's kind of just right on the
Right
right hand
there,
there. There's those 8 or so lots.
Ryan, you had a comment? Okay. Just a question that I have. Let's just assume for a moment that we don't deal with that area in its entirety. Do we now have enough information from the one concerned citizen based on their comments to council to move forward swiftly with their request, if that's necessary to do it by itself?
I'd want to take one more look at it and truly understand how far he's into it and really look at those properties a little closer. I mean, I'm pretty familiar with them, but I think it could be I think it could be done in fairly short order.
Yeah, Kara?
That would also be an amendment when we brought that forward as an amendment to the ordinance. If it's something that we've already had discussion on, there's already been a public hearing, we've heard input from the affected property owner. That would be one where if council was so inclined, we could waive readings.
Okay, okay. I just was curious, what the logistics of just moving through that one request would be and what other requirements we would place on the requester. All right. Anything else on this? Okay, thank you, Dave, on that one. Okay, next one that is marked F3, anything on F2? Okay, F3.
Okay, F3 and F4, I'm gonna kind of combine, we're looking at the same thing, talking about really a lot of the same related items. The first item is a preliminary site development plan, second item is a preliminary plat. The preliminary site development plan is required as part of the rezoning from item F2. As we're familiar, the developers proposing a pretty wide range of and variety of housing options for this development with price points throughout the entire development. Over 550 residential units, just under 15 commercial lots, all on 121 acres. This is part of the East Marion sub-area plan that laid out a walkable community neighborhood, a lot of private, public, open space, utilizing the existing features of the land, not looking at that huge mass grading that we often see with a lot of developments, just kind of working with how the land really lays and works. This did go to the Planning and Zoning Commission a few months ago and was recommended approval for 6-0. One of the handouts I did was the housing palette. I'll go quickly through it, not dwelling on anything too long. And the second item was related to the airport, which we'll get to at the end. So again, wide variety of housing palettes. The colors obviously coordinate with the colors on the map that you have in front of you, which will be on the screen in a second. Single families, duplexes, row homes, fourplexes, and ultimately some multifamily products. And then again, on the screen is the image that essentially you have in front of you as well. So we can see a pretty wide variety of, again, homes spread throughout the neighborhood, with the multifamilies anchoring the north and south ends, just north of the commercial. It's in the green. With a preliminary site development plan, this is just the general concept of how he wants to lay it out. It does match the preliminary plat. So roads could shift some depending on when you get into a little more detailed engineering. They've identified regional basins. A basin in this area that runs really along, potentially to serve additional property off this site. That's not been fully designed yet, of course, until the engineer really gets into calculations. Unique to the site. Okay. Unique to the site, we have approximately a 7-acre park in this location with one of the well locations. And then Linmar has a 15-acre site for hopefully a potential elementary school. Obviously first of East Side 13 should be valuable to the neighborhood. So it's all about creating those connections to the city assets, school assets to the north. With this development, there will be some improvements to Fernau Road. When the school comes in, there will obviously be some additional improvements, getting that road transferred from redesigned from a county design to a city cross section. The road network's pretty unique, mix of public streets and public alleyways. Most of the lots will have access from both public street and public alleyway. A handful of lots only have direct access from a public alley. So those alleys have been widened to accommodate the largest fire apparatuses that we have. That's been thoroughly reviewed by engineering, fire, public service, and engineering. Planning and Zoning Commission did recommend approval of the preliminary site development plan and preliminary plat. Looking down a little bit more, this is just, again, the preliminary plat. We've already kind of seen that with the site development plan. But I want to focus just a minute on the airport impact, or the impact of the airport to the property. On the screen right there, kind of hard to see. And again, this is in front of you as well. This is a sub-area plan that was put together by RDG. We're looking at the hatching. Again, I know it's really hard to see on the image there. There we go. You can kind of see this blue hatching throughout the development here, along with some of the red hatching down here at the south end. So this is going to this is essentially the airport overlay, the approach zone, the transition zones overlaid on the land use plan. So when this was developed, we worked with HDR, staff reached out to them, took his comments and concerns, took them to RDG, had the approach and transition districts placed on top of the potential land use map, and then the land use map was then redesigned around some of those restrictions that the airport creates. So looking at more detail, and again, I had to change the orientation to get everything to fit, but again, this is in front of you as well. The blue area is the actual edge of the runway, the actual surface of the runway. The red area, zone A, that's your no build area. You can see the highway kind of running through the middle of it more or less. So that's the no build, that ground sacred for the approach. And then as you begin to move north along the approach, and then you move up the sides, you have the approach zone. There's benchmarks for the different levels of the approach zone. We're looking at a lower density, well, it calls for low density residential or warehouse space. In our plan, we created the green space. We didn't see warehousing being the greatest use on our newest neighborhood, East of Marion, so we just left it as green space for now. Again, that can change depending on council's direction, or it could be low density residential, larger lot homes in that zone. And then as you continue to move out beyond and up the approach, obviously you're allowed to go a little more denser. You're able to start creating that height needed for single story, multi-story, 3-story homes and structures as you keep moving north. And by the time you're getting out to the periphery of the initial approach zone here, you're really, based on the elevations of the runway and elevations on the site, you're gonna be able to start getting those multifamily homes. And again, they'll all be reviewed. A lot of speculation here because we don't know what the final grade is yet on that preliminary plat, where the structures are actually gonna sit, roadways, elevations versus the runway. So again, as they start developing phase 1, 2, 3, et cetera, of the final plat, we'll be looking at those elevations to ensure that they do meet all the requirements, and we'll know the general height of all the structures allowed out there. And again, once we start getting into this area, the height they should be able to meet and build multi-story buildings. The other question that came up, I mentioned it, stormwater. We're looking at the developer's looking at a kind of a basin with the drainage area running through the middle of the development. This basin has not been designed yet, so you don't know if it's wet, dry. It just hasn't been designed yet. What's it going to accommodate? Is this going to accommodate just the immediate development, or will it be designed in a manner to handle a much larger regional basin? Differences there. Obviously, if it's a localized basin just serving the developer, that has to remain private owned and maintained. If it's regional, that's something that the city will typically take on responsibility for. Again, to be determined when we get that more final design. We're at 1,000 feet looking down and trying to get some ideas. Once the final plats come in, we'll definitely know a lot more going forward. But in concept, locations work, homes, the densities work based on the approach zones and the transitional side. The traditional side ones work as well. Just a small corner of the property will be affected by the first transitional zone here. But again, it does support the single family and duplexes in that area. Questions?
Yeah, well,
2 questions. Do you know, has Linmar announced or has any plans for that building there? No, nothing.
Nope.
So
They
that
do have
potentially-
15 acres there, so that does accommodate that's a minimum size I want for an elementary, so you can hope.
There's still a possibility they may not build an
Correct.
elementary there. And then is that park, that city park section, is that in CIP? Was that in the CIP? Not yet. Okay.
No, not yet. Then the park is 9 acres today with, we're reducing that because we're working with the developer for road constructions for some of the city parts of the road, kind of doing that exchange road improvements and that's a details that will come forward here, in a future meeting in terms of the agreement.
Gotcha.
Anybody else have a question? I've got a couple. Yeah.
Just a comment, I really appreciate the age in place neighborhood that this is looking to. I think this is a great example of what we've talked about with options at different levels within. You can start, move, and stay within your neighborhood. So applaud for that, and also really like and have visited a number of the communities that have the alley access for both the homes and not. And so that you'll say it's more walkable because you're right by people's front doors and without garages sticking out. So appreciate the variety that they are presenting here and are doing. It's exciting to hopefully see it come to fruition.
Dave, the question that I have is really, or questions are really centered around the basin. And I guess, Mike, I don't know if it's appropriate for our aviation consultants to at least, have they looked at this? Have they given us any kind of feedback? I
Yeah.
don't recall.
Yeah, we actually talked to Jerry this afternoon.
Okay.
Again, all in all, the overall plan works. Again, the basins, it's gonna be preferred to be dry. It's because it's a wildlife attractant.
Right.
There's ways to mitigate that. But the mitigation measures, you gotta keep employing them and they gotta keep working. So again, he was encouraging dry, and we'll work with the developer to go that route.
If I can add, so as I understand it from staff, this was developed before I was here, but as RDG was doing the sub-area plan, Jerry was consulted as they were developing the sub-area plan, which the developer is building too. The second thing is, Mike has reached out to the DNR. This is a couple of months ago, so we're still waiting on the DNR to come out to give us input on, bless you, on the water that's around the airport. And so this is one of those areas that we would be making sure we talk to them about as well, and taking in anything that they say as we continue on. And the conversations, as preliminary plat, we're gonna have to transition to the final plat. So that's when we're gonna get really down into the details of the development. And I know Kim has been working with Dave and Mike with the developer. And so there's some conversations around the detention basin that's gonna have to continue to occur. So there's still a lot of work that has to be done after the preliminary plat is approved, but before final plat.
Okay, so we're in progress with that consideration, and it's an important one. Okay. Did that take care of both of the items?
I think so.
Great.
Yeah, yes. Oh, the preliminary, and yeah. And Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval 6-0 of both items.
Okay, thank you. Okay. That brings us to the end of our work session agenda, with the exception of moving into closed session.
Your Honor, I move to adjourn to closed session regarding litigation and personnel matters as permitted under section 21.51C and section 21.51I of the Code of Iowa, 2 separate matters.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to adjourn to closed session regarding litigation and personnel matters as permitted under section 21.51C and 21.51I of the Code of Iowa, 2 separate matters. May I please have the legal statement?
Thank you, Your Honor. I've reviewed the proposed subject matter for the closed sessions and find the same to be appropriate under Iowa Code Section 21.51C and 21.51I.
Very good, thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Miskman?
Yes.
Mr. Jensen?
Yes.
Mr. Harper?
Yes.
Mr. Brandt?
Yes.
Ms. Menzer?
Yes.
Okay, we are moving into closed session. Thank you so much.